Think about a Flintstone show. By that I mean a primetime animated show. Who could do that?
With the Flintstones, we'll have a yabba dabba do time, a dabba do time, we'll have a gay old...
If the Flintstones has always felt strangely adult to you, it's because entire scenes were removed and the show was never the same. The Flintstones we watch today in syndication is not the show that originally aired. Somewhere between 1960 and the decades of reruns that followed, crucial footage vanished. Scenes were cut, episodes were shortened, and entire storylines were quietly erased to make the show more palatable for afternoon children's television. On paper, they were removing cigarette commercials and toning down marital content.
Best-selling, best-tasting filter cigarette. Winston tastes good, like a cigarette should.
In practice, they were gutting the DNA of what made the Flintstones revolutionary. That's why certain episodes feel like they're missing setup. That's why Fred and Wilma's relationship sometimes shifts tone without explanation. And that's why the show's famous adult humor occasionally lands in strange, incomplete ways. The connective tissue was removed, and nobody bothered to stitch the wounds. In this video, we're going to look at what was cut, why the networks made those decisions, and how those missing scenes broke the continuity and cultural legacy of the Flintstones. By the end, you'll see a very different show hiding inside the one we got. Page to screen, the pitch that almost failed. To understand why footage went missing, we first have to look at what the Flintstones was supposed to be. In 1960, animation was for children. Saturday morning cartoons, theatrical shorts before movies, cheap syndicated programming to sell cereal. The idea of a primetime animated sitcom for adults was considered commercial suicide. Every network had rejected it. Bill Hanna and Joe Barbera had left MGM's animation unit in 1957 when the studio shut down theatrical cartoon production. They formed Hanna-Barbera Productions and spent 2 years trying to convince anyone in television that animation could work in primetime. Their pitch was simple. Take the Honeymooners, the wildly popular live-action sitcom starring Jackie Gleason, and set it in the Stone Age. Same blue-collar frustrations, same marital dynamics, same working-class humor, just with dinosaurs instead of buses. ABC passed, CBS passed. NBC looked at the concept and laughed them out of the room. The problem wasn't the quality of the idea, it was the math. A primetime show needed 22 to 26 episodes per season. Theatrical quality animation cost roughly $65,000 per 7-minute short. A half-hour primetime episode would cost nearly $300,000, more than most live-action dramas. The economics didn't work. Then Hanna-Barbera made a radical proposal. What if we don't animate it like a theatrical cartoon? What if we use limited animation, the cost-cutting techniques they'd pioneered on shows like Huckleberry Hound and Quick Draw McGraw? They could produce a half-hour episode for $65,000, cheaper than most live-action sitcoms once you factored in sets, costumes, and actor salaries. ABC, desperate for programming and intrigued by the novelty, greenlit a pilot. The Flintstones was born, but it came with a catch. The budget was so tight that every frame had to count. The sponsor who shaped Bedrock. Here's where the story gets complicated because the Flintstones wasn't just a TV show. It was a 30-minute cigarette commercial disguised as family entertainment.
Winston tastes good, like a cigarette should.
Yeah.
See you soon, Rocky.
ABC sold the entire first 2 seasons to a single sponsor, R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company, the maker of Winston cigarettes. This wasn't unusual for 1960, when single-sponsor shows were still common, but it gave Winston unprecedented creative control over the content. The cigarette company didn't just buy advertising time. They owned the show. Their executives attended script meetings. They approved character designs. They dictated which scenes stayed and which got cut, all in service of selling cigarettes to American families. The opening and closing of every episode featured Fred and Barney smoking Winstons, often integrated directly into the plot. Fred would light up after a hard day at the quarry. Barney would offer him a Winston to calm his nerves. The characters would face the camera and deliver the tagline, "Winston tastes good, like a cigarette should."
Winston tastes good, like a cigarette should.
But Winston's influence went deeper than product placement. The sponsor demanded that the Flintstones maintain a specific tone, sophisticated enough to appeal to adult smokers, but family-friendly enough that parents would let their children watch. This created a bizarre tonal tightrope. Episodes dealt with gambling addiction, marital infidelity scares, financial desperation, and midlife crises. Heavy adult themes wrapped in prehistoric puns and dinosaur gags.
Flintstones, meet the Flintstones, they're the modern Stone Age family.
The show had to be funny enough for kids, but real enough that adults saw themselves in Fred's struggles. When the Surgeon General's report on smoking and health was published in 1964, linking cigarettes to cancer and heart disease, everything changed. Winston pulled its sponsorship. ABC scrambled to find new advertisers, and the new sponsors, companies like Welch's and Post Cereals, wanted a different show. They wanted the Flintstones to skew younger, to be safer, to be more clearly a children's program. Entire scenes and storylines were rewritten or cut. The animation crisis of 1960. The technical limitations of producing the Flintstones created a visual style that was revolutionary by accident. Hanna-Barbera's limited animation technique was born of pure financial desperation, but it gave the show a distinctive look that separated it from everything else on television. To understand what was later cut and why, you need to understand how the show was actually made. Traditional theatrical animation, the kind produced by Disney or Warner Brothers, required 24 individual drawings for every second of screen time. A 7-minute Looney Tunes short used roughly 10,000 individual cells. That level of detail was impossible for a weekly half-hour show. Hanna-Barbera pioneered a system that reduced animation to its absolute minimum. Characters were designed in layers, a static body with a moving mouth, a still torso with moving arms. Backgrounds were reused constantly. Walk cycles repeated every few steps. The most famous cost-saving technique was the walking background loop. When Fred walked through Bedrock, the background would scroll behind him on a repeating cycle, often the same 4 or 5 buildings passing by over and over. Sharp-eyed viewers noticed this immediately, but it became part of the show's charm. The limited animation forced the writers to focus on dialogue and character rather than visual gags. The Flintstones became a show about talking, about relationships, about the comedy of everyday domestic life, because they literally couldn't afford to animate elaborate slapstick sequences. But even with these shortcuts, the production was brutal. The studio employed over 150 artists working around the clock to produce 26 episodes per season. Pencilers, inkers, painters, background artists, all operating on an assembly line that would have made Henry Ford proud. When deadlines got tight, corners were cut. Some episodes featured noticeably less movement than others. Some backgrounds were clearly rushed. And some scenes, the ones that required complex animation or didn't directly serve the plot, simply got dropped to save time and money. The brutalist Bedrock, designing a Stone Age city. The visual world of Bedrock is one of the most meticulously designed environments in television history, and it was created almost entirely by accident through a combination of budget constraints and brilliant improvisation. The production design of the Flintstones had to solve an impossible problem. How do you create a prehistoric world that looks futuristic enough to be interesting but primitive enough to be funny? The solution came from art director Walter Clinton and background designer Fernando Montealegre, who drew inspiration from an unlikely source, mid-century modern architecture. The buildings of Bedrock, with their angular rock formations and geometric shapes, mirror the brutalist and modernist designs that were reshaping American cities in 1960. The Flintstones house, with its distinctive sloped rock roof and open floor plan, looks remarkably similar to the suburban ranch homes being mass-produced across America. This wasn't just aesthetic choice, it was narrative strategy. The show worked because Bedrock felt familiar, like a slightly distorted reflection of suburban Connecticut or California. But creating this world on a television budget required constant innovation and reuse. The same establishing shots of downtown Bedrock appear in dozens of episodes. The interior of the Flintstones' living room was so carefully designed that it could be drawn quickly and consistently by different artists. Every appliance, every piece of furniture, every decorative element had to be simple enough to reproduce across hundreds of episodes, but detailed enough to sell the world. The famous living appliances, Dinosaurs and prehistoric animals performing household tasks were born from this design philosophy. It's funnier and cheaper to draw a woolly mammoth working as a shower.
That's enough water, Henry. I don't mind shower.
Than to animate complex Stone Age plumbing. These designs became iconic, but they also created problems. Some episodes required specific locations or set pieces that would only appear once. Those expensive single-use backgrounds were the first things cut when episodes ran long or budgets ran short. We're halfway through our journey into Bedrock's buried secrets. If you're enjoying these excavations into the hidden history of television, please illuminate our day by clicking that like button and subscribing to Golden Flicker. We're a growing channel, and every subscription helps us keep these forgotten stories alive. Also, which classic TV show has a production mystery you've always wondered about? Let us know in the comments below. And now, the Golden Flicker moment, the censored scenes. Golden Flicker moment, the censored scenes. Now we reach the heart of the mystery. The original broadcasts of the Flintstones in 1960 and 1961 ran approximately 26 minutes of content per episode, standard for the era with commercial breaks. But when the show entered syndication in the late 1960s and throughout the 1970s, those episodes were systematically shortened to 22 minutes to allow for more commercial time. What was in those missing 4 minutes per episode? Across 166 episodes, that's over 11 hours of footage that simply vanished. The most obvious cuts were the Winston cigarette commercials, the integrated segments where Fred and Barney smoked on screen. These weren't just removed from the commercial breaks, they were excised from the episodes themselves. In several first-season episodes, Fred and Barney's cigarette moments were woven into the plot. Fred would calm his nerves with a Winston before a big bowling tournament. Barney would share a smoke with Fred during a heart-to-heart conversation. When these scenes were cut for syndication, the episodes developed strange gaps. Characters would be mid-conversation, then suddenly be somewhere else. The emotional beats that the smoking scenes provided, moments of male bonding and vulnerability, were simply gone, but the cuts went far deeper. Entire subplots were removed to trim runtime. The most famous lost content involves Wilma's pregnancy in Season 3. The original broadcasts featured several extended scenes of Fred nervously preparing for fatherhood, including a deleted sequence where he attends a Stone Age LeMays class and faints repeatedly. These scenes were deemed too mature for afternoon children's programming and were cut. If you watch those episodes today, Fred goes from mildly concerned about the pregnancy to suddenly being a panicked, expectant father with no transition. The honeymoon episode from Season 5 originally featured a much longer sequence of Fred and Barney at a prehistoric casino, losing money and getting deeper into debt. The extended version showed the genuine desperation of gambling addiction, with Fred pawning Wilma's anniversary gift to chase his losses. That sequence was cut down to less than a minute, removing the weight of Fred's mistake and making his eventual redemption feel unearned. The Honeymooners lawsuit and technical sorcery. Despite the missing footage and truncated episodes, The Flintstones remains a technical and cultural landmark that changed television forever. But its success nearly ended before it began, thanks to a legal threat from the one man who recognized exactly what Hanna-Barbera had done.
If you compare Flintstones to Honeymooners, that's the biggest compliment you can give me, because the Honeymooners is a genius, you know.
Jackie Gleason. In 1960, shortly after The Flintstones premiered to massive ratings, Gleason's lawyers contacted ABC with a lawsuit threat. The claim was simple and undeniable. The Flintstones was a direct copy of the Honeymooners. Fred Flintstone was Ralph Cramden. Barney Rubble was Ed Norton. The plots, the character dynamics, the blue-collar frustrations, even specific lines of dialogue were lifted wholesale from Gleason's show. Hanna-Barbera had essentially taken the Honeymooners, traced over it with cavemen, and sold it as original content. Gleason had every legal right to sue, and by most accounts, he would have won.
So many people say, didn't you copy the Honeymooners?
But he made a decision that saved the Flintstones and changed television history. He dropped the lawsuit. According to interviews Gleason gave years later, He didn't pursue the case because he didn't want to be the guy who killed a show that was employing hundreds of artists and animators. He also recognized that the Flintstones, despite being a copy, was introducing his brand of working-class comedy to a new generation. He let it go, and the Flintstones survived. The sound design, handled by the team at Hanna-Barbera's audio department, created an entire sonic language for Bedrock. Every footstep, every dinosaur appliance, every stone car had its own distinct sound. Life after prime time. The Flintstones aired its final primetime episode on April 1st, 1966, after 6 seasons and 166 episodes.
A brand new thing that had never been done before, an animated primetime show.
It was the longest-running animated primetime series until The Simpsons broke its record in 1997. But the show's real life and its real transformation began in syndication. That's where the Flintstones became both ubiquitous and mutilated, spreading across the world in increasingly compromised versions. When local stations purchased syndication packages in the late 1960s, they received episodes that had already been trimmed from their original broadcast length, but stations often cut them further. Some removed entire scenes they deemed too adult. Others edited for content that might offend local sensibilities. A few stations in the South removed episodes that featured African American guest voices or implied racial integration. By the 1970s, there were dozens of different versions of the Flintstones circulating, each one slightly different, each one missing different pieces. The most extreme cuts occurred when the show moved to Saturday morning children's blocks in the 1970s and 1980s. Networks like CBS and ABC, now airing The Flintstones as pure children's programming, removed anything that suggested adult themes. Scenes of Fred drinking beer at the Water Buffalo Lodge were cut.
Hello, hello, hello. Chickens run high home. We're always run.
References to Wilma and Betty's previous boyfriends disappeared. An entire episode about Fred and Barney getting drunk on cactus juice
Some Welchade, Barney. Welchade's the power-packed refreshment.
was pulled from rotation entirely and remains one of the hardest Flintstones episodes to find today. Today, the lost footage remains a holy grail for animation historians and Flintstones completists. While some deleted scenes have appeared on DVD releases, the full original broadcast versions of most episodes are simply gone. The master tapes were either reused, destroyed, or lost in studio archives. Yabba Dabba Aftermath. The Flintstones is more than just an animated sitcom. It's a time capsule of an era when television was trying to figure out what animation could be, who it was for, and what it could say. Even with its missing scenes, truncated episodes, and decades of syndication butchery, the core of what made the show revolutionary still shines through. The idea that cartoons could tell stories about real adult lives, real marital struggles, real economic anxiety, just with dinosaurs and stone wheels. The missing footage represents something larger than lost entertainment. It's evidence of how television changes over time, how shows are reshaped by sponsors, networks, and cultural shifts until the original vision becomes almost unrecognizable. The Flintstones we grew up watching in afternoon reruns is a ghost of the primetime show that aired in 1960. Somewhere in studio archives, in private collections, and in degrading film cans, the original Flintstones still exists. We're left with a show that is simultaneously the most famous animated series in television history and one of the most incomplete. If you discovered something new today, illuminate our day by clicking like and subscribe to our channel so you never miss a story from the annals of television history. Which classic show should we excavate next? A different animated pioneer, or perhaps the secret production disasters behind a beloved sitcom? Let us know in the comments. Until next time, keep the flicker alive.